Helen, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I thoroughly enjoyed your book, Precious. It really is precious. That line from that movie, Jerry Maguire, you had me at hello. You had me at your dedication. Mom and Dad, the most precious gems of all. I just love that.
Thank you so much.
And I must say that I don't know if it was intentional, but or Freudian, but this is the shape of Sri Lanka.
I can't believe I didn't notice it. I love it.
So Sri Lanka is often referred to as the island of gems. When you think of Sri Lanka beyond sapphires, what stones do you think of?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, it's Ratnadvipa. So for me as a jewellery historian, I know that it is a very historic island with sort of myths and histories that go back to the stories of the Old Testament with King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba giving gifts of gemstones from Sri Lanka. So that's millennia old stories. As a gemologist, I know that we have over 50 different varieties of other gemstones. And I've been to mines where they produce moonstone here, peridot, chrysoberyl, garnet, amethyst, others millions, or spinel. Spinel is very important to Sri Lanka. So you've got many other varieties. It's a rich and beautiful gem-varied country.
It is. Do you have a favorite?
I have a favourite. I am partial to sapphire. I love the Sri Lankan sapphires. So that's probably the one I feel most emotionally tied to.
Well, do you think there's something about the Sri Lankan sapphire that's different to, say, a sapphire from Kashmir? What makes our Sri Lankan sapphires special?
Yeah, so part of it is the history. I love that it's a country that's been mining and trading for 2,000 years consistently, which we can't say about any other location for sapphires in the world. But it's not just that, the sapphires are also wonderful quality and large. So the largest sapphires in the world historically always come from Sri Lanka. So some of the stones that I've handled have been 200, 300, 400 carats, whereas the largest ones from Kashmir are going to be in the 10s and 20s, maybe 50s if you're lucky. So you've got large, high quality, historic gem material, which means it's unique.
Lovely. Tell me, we always do tend to hear about the blue sapphire, but in the book you highlighted an experience with a beautiful golden yellow sapphire. Do you think that colored sapphires are an undervalued market? And if so, do you think that there's a particular color that requires recognition?
Oh, brilliant. I think you're spot on there because it's something where, of course, people hear the word sapphire, they think blue, because that is the variety name for the blue version. But every single colour of the rainbow is the Corundum family. So red sapphire is ruby, but you have orange and yellow and pink and purple and green. So you've got this whole rainbow of colour options in the sapphire family. There's a very famous one that comes from Sri Lanka, the Paparacha sapphire, which is this orangey pinky colour, and it's famously sort of lotus coloured from the island. That's seen much more popularity in recent days, which I'm really happy to hear about. But I think there are other colours like yellow has become much more popular recently. I mean, historically here, people have loved yellow sapphires for centuries. But probably one of my favourites, and I think this is where we're moving into much more subtle appreciation of gem colours, and these slightly greeny and bluey, or the purpley bluey colours, the mix of colours you see in gems. So I love these kind of mixed colour gemstones where you see the two tones together.
So I know you also wear a scientist hat sometimes.
Yes, I do.
Can you tell me how does the Sri Lankan sapphire, how is it available in this variety of colours?
Oh, I love questions like this. I'm a total gem geek and I am a bit of a scientist. So it's a bit like when an artist has a palette and they mix colours. You know that if you mix yellow with blue, you get green. So you take two colours that have got colouring elements in them. It's exactly the same as sapphires. So you have certain tiny trace elements chemically in the crystal structure, which create a colour. In the case of blue, it's iron together with titanium. Now, I'll check that's right actually.
I wouldn't know.
So in the case of different colours, you might have a certain trace element that will be one colour, and you mix them together and you get another. So you get colours, you get iron, you get chromium, even vanadium creates purple colours. So it's a scientific mix. Quite clever.
One would never know actually the science behind it. So you mentioned the Paparacha. I also wondered the Sri Lankan star sapphire, because it's so rare and also I think, very difficult to replicate in a lab, I would imagine. Isn't that poised to sort of increase in value over time, in your opinion?
I also think that's a really good place to be looking. One of the first stones I bought was a beautiful Sri Lankan star sapphire of 10 carats, because I exactly feel this way about them. They are hard to replicate in a lab because the star doesn't look natural, and it's created in nature by these very fine inclusions that are all aligned in a certain way, so the light shines off them to create the star. So in nature, we probably replicate that perfectly with their right. And I think they've been undervalued for many years because people haven't understood that they're so special in the way this gem is formed. And of course, if you think about a star, it's always lovely associations with it, and you can get beautiful star sapphires.
That, I think, is a good tip for all of us in terms of the Sri Lankan market. But what if somebody were to be starting a collection or adding to a collection? What is one Sri Lankan stone you think would be?
So, I mean, if I'm honest, there are so many things I would love to have, so I have lots of answers to that. But I do think sapphires are a good place to start. My tip for people buying is always buy what you love, because firstly, you need to love it, because that's going to give you joy.
Right.
But secondly, if you love it, someone else is likely to, which means you've probably got a good start for a value price. Having said that, I can also look at the market sort of financially and historically that I know, and I can see that there's also some very interesting gemstones which have been under-recognised for a very long time, but have started to really become popular in the industry. Spinel, garnets, these are gems that are coming from other places in the world, but they're coming up in all these lovely colours. And I think there's a real potential for these, these other coloured gemstones, not the traditional ones we've known for a very long time.
Yes, and this all bodes well for Sri Lanka.
Indeed it does.
And you also mentioned that sapphires are more durable than, say, emeralds. And could you give us a scientific reason for what that is?
So we score things in gemology on something called the Mohs scale for hardness, which is from 10 of diamond down to 1. And as diamond is 10, sapphire's at 9. So it's the second hardest gem material that we have, which means it doesn't scratch at all easily, only by sapphire or diamond. And many of our iPhone cover cases are synthetic sapphire, by the way, because it's so durable. They create that in labs to then have a very, very protected face cover, better than glass, right? But then there's also the matter of whether something is tough and it can break or not. And that's what sapphire also has that's really good about the gem. It's a very durable stone, so it doesn't break so easily, which emeralds can because they have inclusions. So it's to do with how tightly packed the crystal structure is.
So when I was reading your book and reading these stories of the provenance of these stones, the history, the rarity, the fact that they're found in nature, I can't imagine that colored stones would be as impacted as diamonds have been in terms of the movement towards lab-grown stones. Do you think that that's the case?
Well, I think this is an interesting question because it's something that I've spent quite a lot of time studying the history of gems. Not because it's just an interesting thing to know about, because if you understand history, you can understand the present and you can potentially look at the future. And I like looking at this diamond question within the context of ruby and sapphire and also pearl. Because in the 19th century, turn of the century, we started to see big moves, so over 100 years ago, of synthesizing ruby and sapphire to some extent and pearls with their cultured pearls in the 1920s. And what happened was, rubies and pearls in particular became very commercially available in their cultural synthetic form in the 20s. Ruby and pearl prices collapsed. There's also the big depression in America, which made a big difference. But what we see today, if someone says natural ruby or natural pearl to me, I think the most expensive gems in the world. So the prices have completely rebound because you've got two different markets. And I think what we are probably going to look at with the diamond market is that there'll be a total split between buying natural diamonds and buying the cultured or the synthetic lab-grown diamonds. Because people are going to look at those as more costume varieties.
Right.
The only difference is we've got to make sure that the trade is utterly transparent. We've got to know what we're buying. And diamonds are quite hard to distinguish. But we can, and that's what's important.
And I feel colored stones are less so, right?
If somebody gave me a synthetic ruby, I could probably tell you across the room because they really have a different light to them. Yeah, absolutely.
Very interesting. Now, in terms of the consumer, ethical and sustainable standards are becoming more important. In your experience in the mines, how does Sri Lanka manage these practices?
It's one of the reasons I love Sri Lanka and I love coming to the mines, because you see a country that has mined consistently for centuries in very similar, consistent manners for reasons of sustainability. So when you go to the mines in Sri Lanka, I mean, not everyone will have known this. You see a paddy field with maybe a shaft that has been sunken down into it, which when it's finished will be refilled, and that field will be workable again. Quite often those mining systems are also cooperatives, where the miners have a share in the find, as do the people who use the equipment as well as these owners of the land, which means there's this community approach to mining here. It's also something where I just feel that if you've had families in the mining business, you want your children and grandchildren to continue. And there's been a great push here to sort of ward off the big corporates coming in. And I think this idea that, you know, we're protecting the land for people and our future here is a really important approach to mining and the gems in general.
I love that, and I'm happy to hear, because again, I didn't know that, and I didn't realize that the miners directly benefit from the sales, because we hear so much in terms of the blood diamonds and things like that. So again, another reason to be proud of our Sri Lankan stone industry. Now, in terms of challenges that the miners are facing in Sri Lanka, what do you think are the most pressing ones, and more broadly, the gem industry in Sri Lanka? What challenges do you feel Sri Lanka is facing specifically?
I think partly because the country is so focused on mining sustainable practices, you then have other countries that are doing big corporate, not necessarily not sustainable, but more corporate approaches. You get higher turnover, lower costs, all that kind of thing that you have in any local market. So you have got those challenges. You've got sort of big miners in African countries where they're mass producing, so you can have a lower cost per capita. Having said that, I don't worry about it so much, because people understand the value of a Sri Lankan sapphire over another sapphire in another country. For me, and I certainly tell the story when I get the opportunity, a Sri Lankan sapphire is historic and sustainable. So you've got a gem that is easily distinguishable because these stones have other qualities that we can define as geologists. But it also has that emotional impact as well, and that's what adds value in gems. So I think there is a market where more gems are found, you end up with different pricing structures. But there's always one where you end up with the finer and the more valued ones separated off from the lower quality, for example. So I'm not so worried about that long term, as long as people understand in the market how lucky they are to have a Sri Lankan sapphire specifically.
With really the onus is on our jewelry to exactly marketing our Sri Lankan gems as they should be. So I was thrilled to see at the beginning of the book the maps, and Sri Lanka ranked the highest in terms of being a source for ancient gems. We saw pearls, rubies, sapphires, garnets, beryls, which explains the illustrious history that these gems have had, and where they, from Queen of Sheba to Queen Victoria to now Princess Kate. These Sri Lankan sapphires really have traveled the world and throughout history in such a beautiful way. Why do you think the sapphire, the blue sapphire, holds such prominence as a color?
Oh, what a great question. I mean, when I think of blue, and historically I think of blue, the first thing that comes to mind is the heavens, the sky. And if you associate the colour with the sky, then there becomes a religious divine aspect quite automatically in most cultures. So from a very European context, we think of blue as being the sky, the heavens, and then of course God and rulership. But also it's associated with loyalty and hope. It's also, for us, it's a classic go-to engagement ring, as we've seen with Princess Diana and Kate. My mother's engagement ring is a Sri Lankan sapphire. I know, I didn't make that association until I read the book. I know. This is my other home, I tell you. I think I'm part Sri Lankan.
I think so.
And so you can see these associations of colour. If you imagine you go back, centuries or millennia into different cultures, you can see that if an emerald is green, you're going to think of the grass and the trees and growth and fertility. If ruby is red, you're going to think of power and blood and fire and what's running through your veins, aren't you? So you see the blue of the sapphire, and you think of the heavens or the sea, but nature in great power. So it makes sense to me that even over here we've got sort of astrological associations with sapphires. This idea that blue can be a very powerful colour in many different ways.
Well, on that note, there are some cultures that believe that certain gems are inauspicious or unlucky. Have you come across any such particular
Well, it's exactly
superstitions?
this with sapphire, isn't it? Where we've also got sort of in some of the Asian cultures where if your astrology does not fit the blue of the sapphire, you don't wear a blue sapphire. I mean, I think of the great collections in India, the Maharajas, where greens and reds were the real go-to stones, because perhaps blue was considered too powerful for some people to wear or too dangerous. And of course here people might wear a yellow sapphire if they feel more comfortable with the yellow colour than the blue. But it was funny how that colour shift really changed around the time of Princess Diana's engagement ring.
Yes.
And then when Kate got it, I was working a lot in China at the time, and suddenly all the girls were wearing blue sapphires and wearing blue dresses, and you did not see that in China until about then.
Really?
So sapphires changed the face of even the fashion industry at times.
That is something. Now tell me, the Queen Victoria's tiara, sapphires and diamonds. Can you tell us your story or your interplay with it when you first held it in your hand?
I love this jewel, and it's such a sweet, beautiful, romantic piece. So to describe it, it's a tiara form, a coronet, because it can be made into a complete circle. And it's tiny, it's only 11 centimetres across. She was quite a small lady. And it's made with sapphires that came from her family connection, with diamonds, and her husband, Prince Albert, designed it himself with his family crest as part of the design and had it made up for her in 1840, which was the year of their wedding. So it doesn't get much more romantic or sentimental from a kind of making the jewel perspective. And she adored it. She wore it around the back of her chignon bun when she was a young wife. And it was a very romantic story because she was obviously very much in love with her husband. And even after he died, she carried on wearing the coronet on top of her widow's cap. And for the opening of Parliament, when she should have been wearing a crown, she had a crown carried next to her on a cushion, and she wore the coronet, so she was close to her husband who passed. So it's a very romantic story. I was lucky enough to handle this before it came to the V&A, it came to Victoria and Albert Museum, having left the family. And I'd also known the family had come down through the royal family passed into contact through family members, and was saved for the nation when it was bought by one of our donors to give to the museum. And just before I started there as the senior curator, my predecessor said, would you like to come and see the coronet? And it was so lovely, I got to handle it, and it's a delicate piece, beautifully made. But what's so lovely is the sapphires are slightly, a bit of zoning in some things, there's some sort of boundary of colour. And because the sapphires were important to Queen Victoria, she wanted to use them. She obviously wanted these family sapphires in the coronet. And the jeweller has just used a bit of blue enamel around the inside of the back of the collet to make the colours pop. Which is such a fun thing when you think she's a Queen of England, she could have anything she wanted. But these Sri Lankan sapphires meant more to her than anything else.
Lovely, lovely. And from romance, we can jump to sort of power. I believe one of the most powerful emperors in history was buried with that, was it 192 carat?
Yes, it is. It's the Charlemagne's talisman. And this is one of those gems, I love gems that have got sort of mysterious stories we'll never quite know the answers to, because you can spend your life researching, but you've also got that freedom of imagination. And Charlemagne was the Holy Roman Emperor of Europe and France, sort of 8th, 9th century, so a long time ago. And he was kind of, like a Roman emperor, but later in time. And the story that I love telling, how true this is entirely, you'll never know, it's a 19th century story I think that developed, is the truth is it was a beautiful, big pendant that he had made up with Sri Lankan sapphires. And what's in it today is 190 carat light blue Sri Lankan sapphires, a very big cabochon. And he was buried wearing it, but what had happened originally, the story was he had it made up for his wife by a Middle Eastern mystic to make sure that she would stay in love with him forever. And he gave it to her, and apparently their marriage was very happy. When she died, he continued to wear it and admired it. And then it ended up being given, as they opened the grave, it was being given by Napoleon to Josephine. So it exists today, it's still in the museum today. The Sri Lankan sapphires have great power and magic.
Yes, and they have really gone all over the world. Now the blue bell of Asia, that's another one.
Oh yeah.
Some 300,
392,
almost 400, right?
62 carats.
And it went for
Huge.
some,
$17 million in 2014.
and it was found in that
Helmadula. And what's so lovely is I was in Helmadula the day before yesterday, and I didn't know coming over to Sri Lanka on this trip that I'd go back to the same mines. But there are very, very famous mining areas around the region of Lanka and Sri Lanka. And what I love is that this sapphire was found in 1926, and in 2025, nearly 100 years later, I'm back in the same mining region from exactly where it was originally discovered. Can you imagine that?
well, the serendipity of this story, which leads me to my next one. I mean, can you please share your story of how you realized that your grandfather had been in Bentota at the same place that
It's
you were in?
extraordinary.
Yes,
Well, I've always had this feeling that I've loved Sri Lanka, and I just put it down to just human taste and feeling like you're happy in a wonderful country. So I've been coming back many years. I've been coming to the mines. I've brought students on field trips, and I've learned about the sapphires of this country, and I've been great friends with them, obviously. And I was actually working on my book, and I had all this history about Sri Lankan sapphires. And it was during lockdown, during COVID, I was in my uncle's house, sort of under lockdown for 10 days before I could travel again, and I couldn't leave the bedroom in the daytime. And only at night time I could come into the house, and I found a chest in my uncle's house of letters that my grandfather had written in the 1940s in the war that no one had read. So they were wartime papers. He was an army officer in the war and was a chindit, so a very special operations behind the scenes operative in the 1940s. And as I was reading the letters, suddenly words, all the quite unusual gem places I'd travelled to around the world started coming off the page. I'd been to northern Burma and Bangkok, which is where the land of rubies is. Very few people get to go. I went with 2 Burmese gemologists as a blonde woman going unusual. He'd been there, and I had visited his army barrack house, and I hadn't known at the time. Sri Lanka, I had been always coming back to Bentota and Barilla because I loved this region after going to the mines. And I suddenly read in his diary, rest house in Barilla. And I went back and I found the rest house that he would have stayed in the 40s. It's been turned into a cinnamon ground, I think, hotel.
Cinnamon Bentota. There's another
The Cinnamon Bentota Hotel. And I found a tree that's still there that he would have sat next to drinking his pink pills at the end of the day in 1944. And he was exactly the same age in Bentota as I was when I discovered this story. It was goosebumps all around.
It is goosebumps even for me now. That is.
So I have a tie to Sri Lanka,
Absolutely.
but I have a feeling my grandfather set me a path and I'm walking in his footsteps here in my search of sapphires.
That is a precious story. You wrote so beautifully. More than any other gemstone, sapphires narrate the undulations of life, the low hum of frustration, moments of outrageous fortune, and the rare interventions of what can only be described as destiny. So I think we just spoke to destiny in a personal sense in our previous question. But I am hopeful that this increased interest in colored gems is a good opportunity for Sri Lanka as we rebuild, and will help Sri Lanka shine as it really should. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. I thoroughly enjoyed our chat.
Thank you, Sonia. So did I. It's honestly, it's an honour to be here with you today in this beautiful country. Thank you.